It's the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
This is the Locked On Auburn Podcast, your daily Auburn Tigers podcast presented by Fetch Me Home Delivery. Use promo code FetchMe20 for your first delivery free. I'm Zach Blackerby, joined by Michael Pappas today. What's up, dude?
Nothing much. Also, if you're thinking to yourself, wait, I'm already on Fetch Me.
Yeah.
What do I do?
Right.
Easy. Create a new account. Fetch Me 20. Everyone wins.
Are you speaking from experience here?
No, but I'm sure they would appreciate getting their account numbers up.
All right. I'm cool with it. So we have a few voicemails that we're going to get to. We're going to try to get to them all before we have a conversation with Greg Peterson. He is probably the smartest college basketball person I've ever talked to. So we will chat with him several times throughout the season, and he is so excited that college basketball is here. We're recording this on Tuesday. We're releasing it on Tuesday. His conversation is mostly big picture Auburn stuff. I asked him about Georgia Southern, which Auburn plays tonight for their season opener, and then Davidson. He talks more about Davidson than Georgia Southern. So if you're listening to this on the way to work or something, sometime Wednesday or later in the week, it's still relevant. So don't
bail.
Yeah, don't bail. We don't do that here.
You know, Zach, with college basketball season starting, like you said, there are a lot of people who are, super, super excited. Media members, especially guys that cover college basketball. And so, where we're from, I feel like both of us really, it's all about college.
Where are you from?
Dallas, Texas.
You're from Texas?
It's really all about, college football, just being in the South. Like,
yeah.
We both went to Auburn. It's all about football. And so it's really interesting to see, these guys online who are like, this is the best time of the year, college basketball. I'm like, football season doesn't end for a couple months now.
And, I don't want to go too far down a rabbit hole, but I think some of the frustration with Gus Malzahn in the football program that some of the fan base has, I wonder if that's as prevalent if Bruce Pearl doesn't make a Final Four last year. I think there's some relation there. Maybe not. We'll see. All right, we got some voicemails. I got 3 voicemails, Michael, and I'm going to let you pick which one. Give me a number 1 through 3.
2.
All right, we're doing the second one. You can call the Locked On Auburn podcast voicemail machine at 205-502-4285. We appreciate it. All right, here is number 2.
Hey, guys, you got Matt here. I listening to the show. I wholeheartedly disagree. I think Boobie Whitlow is clearly the better running back. I think that, the patient style works better because I do think he hits the hole when he sees one right off the bat, but there's not a lot of times with this offensive line that there, is a hole right off the bat. But, having DJ Williams, the big thing that's been about him, I kind of think, 2 things. One is kind of like Williams, he really pushed Gus Malzahn to use more running backs, something he would not have done in the past. Rotate a bunch of them in, so I think we're going to see everyone really fresh at the end of the year, which is going to be huge going into the Georgia and Alabama games. And number 2 with DJ Williams, doesn't get talked about enough, will never get talked about enough, how great a pass blocker he is for a freshman running back. And, you hear the coaches talk about it all the time. That's the one that high school running backs never pick up right out the gate. And he's shown himself to be a willing blocker in pass coverage, so you can put him in there on third down. He's kind of the all-around back that we need going forward. I don't think, he should be the guy who gets over 15 carries a game. I think when Boobie comes back, he should be that guy. But again, I don't think any of the running backs should get over 20 carries a game by any stretch of the imagination. They should all, I think it'd be great if both Boobie and DJ hovered in that kind of 10 to 15 range. So hopefully we see that going forward. Hopefully Cadillac keeps pushing Gus to do that. Anyway, thanks for listening, guys, and War Eagle.
Man, I appreciate the call. So a few things there, Michael. First, let's just kind of go in order. For those who missed yesterday's show, Michael and I discussed I'm a big fan of DJ Williams' running style because he just hits the hole over Boobie Whitlow's kind of more patient approach. And I think we're just going to have to agree to disagree there. I'm more of a fan of just hit the hole and run, one-cut style thing. So that's
I don't think there's agree to disagree there. He said at the beginning he thought Boobie was better and then talked about how DJ was the better running back for the whole rest of the call.
Wow. Okay.
Right? I mean, he talked about how great DJ's been as a true freshman and how good he is at running the football, even if the style is not what this guy prefers, what Matt prefers. And then he talked about how great DJ's been at pass blocking, which is something that we know Boobie Whitlow is not good at.
Right. And then, he mentioned DJ being pass blocking. He said nobody's going to talk about it. We talked about it.
Yeah.
We talked about it. And, I mean, there was one specific play where he goes across the formation to pick up an edge rusher to protect Bo Nix. It was like a 4 or 5 yard pass to Sal Cannella a few weeks ago. But yeah, I'm a big fan of what DJ Williams does. And man, going into this season, for some reason, I've just kind of been against Boobie Whitlow. I just haven't seen the hype. So
a lot.
Yeah, is that wrong of me? Maybe so. It might be.
Yeah. I like Boobie Whitlow. I think he's a good running back. Unfortunately, I think he's getting Wally pipped.
All right.
I just think, you know who Wally Pipp is?
Yes.
Okay. That's it.
All right. And then
no need to explain if you know who he is.
Then Matt said 15 carries per running back. I don't think any of the guys on this team need more than that. I think you may see it against Georgia and Alabama, but I just think the way that this team is, and if Malzahn is as creative as running the football as his reputation is, I don't think you need to do that. With Boobie Whitlow, we assume he'll be back for Georgia. We think he'll play. DJ Williams, Sean Shivers, Anthony Schwartz, and then you got Bo Nix as well. Maybe if you do Harold Joyner, the Harold Joyner cat, but I think that goes away when Boobie is kind of 100% healthy. But I think that's enough. I don't think any of those guys need to get over 15 carries per game.
I don't know. I'm pro workhorse back, change of pace back.
Okay.
If you're going to use two. So I'm pretty excited for next year. Get a little like DJ Williams as the workhorse. Sean Shivers as the change of pace.
Tank Bigsby, baby.
Yeah. I just, Mark Anthony Richards, like it's an embarrassment of riches right now at running back. So I guess, there's no harm in holding these guys to 15 carries, but I don't know. I'm just pro workhorse back, so I'm definitely not against them just giving one guy 35 carries every game until he gets hurt and then bring in the next one.
All right, we got two more voicemails. I think we're only going to have time to get to one of them today. You want number 1 or number 3?
3.
Hey, guys. All right, so I'm wondering a little bit more about what happened with the fan base on Saturday at the game. I'm a little less interested in, like, the Auburn specific narrative, like this emerged that the fan base is alienated from Gus or whatever that might be. I've kind of been interested in how, like, the natural landscape of college football might be influencing this. Because, I mean, we've seen it at a bunch of other places besides just Auburn. So I wonder if some things like the ubiquity of televised games, where the in-game event is less special, might be influencing it, or maybe the fact that the college football playoff has made college football a more national sport, so it's like playoff or bust. I wonder if like these kinds of outside influences may have influenced what we saw at the game at Jordan-Hare on Saturday. Anyway, just would love to hear you guys suss that out. Thanks for the podcast.
What does ubiquity mean?
I don't know. Look it up. I think it's a good question. And I think we mentioned this briefly a few shows ago, talking about how the game day experience.
Appearing everywhere or being very common.
Unless you just absolutely love it and crave it, which I'm sure some of the folks listening to the show do. They love going to the games. But me personally, I enjoy watching the game at home more than actually going to the football game. That's just kind of it. You end up spending less money. Now, like when I'm working and, you're in the press box, it's a little different because you don't have to worry about anything and you can like walk to get drinks and food. It's 3 steps. But I mean, just as a fan, unless it's just I travel to, I try to go to, 1 or 2 NFL games a year. And like, that's always fun because it's kind of a treat. But I mean, as far as going to, games as a fan, it's so much better to watch it at home. And, I used to feel like I was in the minority there, but I think now it's not that. And then in regards to the college football playoff or bust mentality, I think it's a big part of it because playing in the Sugar Bowl, and the Sugar Bowl is not one of the semifinal games, it has lost a lot of its shine. It's lost a lot of its appeal. Now, you can say, you've played in a New Year's Day Bowl, and that's fantastic, but it doesn't carry the same weight that it used to. And so going, 10-2, being left out of the SEC championship game and playing in the Sugar Bowl against a team like, I don't know, if Oklahoma gets left out or, a team like that, which kind of what happened a few years ago when Auburn went down there and lost in New Orleans. But that's just not as rewarding as it used to be. So I think going 10-2 and just having an above average to good or great season, but you're not in the top 4, it almost doesn't matter. It almost isn't that big of a difference between going, 10-2 and just being left out versus going 8-4 and, maybe your bowl game's in a more fun town. So I think that's a huge part of it.
A few things that I think you're both correct. For starters, for me personally, I literally cannot afford to go to the games. I don't have the money, but I already pay for cable and internet, and I have multiple televisions, so I can actually have a better experience for less money staying at home. In fact, in a lot of cases, if I were to go to the game, that would be my cable payment for the month. I would have to the whole payment.
Right.
Would get me into one game, much less if I wanted to eat or drink anything. I will say something that college football does much better than a lot of other sporting events is the pageantry, the band, the eagle flying, there's hardly any downtime,
Yes.
Like they're always doing presentations or this or that. There's something going on the whole time.
And it's just like sitting in the stands is cool if there was nobody else there. Or if you just knew that no one around you was going to be annoying. But there always is.
Or it wasn't going to be 105 degrees. But
I'm not even worried about the weather. That doesn't really bother me that much. I'm cool sweating or freezing. Okay. That's fine. It's more of the...
I'm a very sweaty guy.
Sure,
so.
I am too. It doesn't seem to bother me as much as it does a lot of people, which is odd to me because I sweat like crazy too. But I don't know. It's just always folks around me yelling stuff like the girl that was behind me at the Tulane game yelling like Sal Cannello was wide open. I'm like, Sal Cannello's not even on the field, girl. Chill out. Just drives me crazy. Drives me crazy. All right.
You kind of get that anywhere you go though, like that. That happens all the time.
Well, you know where it doesn't happen?
Your couch.
My living room. Absolutely. All right, Greg Peterson coming up. Little college basketball action.
Finding the right pros for home projects can be tough and spark a lot of questions, like, how do I find a pro who can help? Will they do a good job? Will I get a fair price? Well, that's where HomeAdvisor can help. From leaky faucets to major remodels, HomeAdvisor connects you to the right pro for the job in seconds and even helps you get a fair price. Read reviews, check project cost guides, and book appointments. Go to HomeAdvisor.com or download the free HomeAdvisor app to start your next project.
This is Vinny Iyer, host of Locked On Fantasy Football, with your Locked On Fantasy Football Edge of the Day. The rise of the young running backs is here in fantasy football in 2019. Among the rookies, the Bears are completely feeding David Montgomery, and the Bills have made a pivot to use Devin Singletary more over Frank Gore. But don't forget about the Buccaneers' Ronald Jones, who has seemed to take over more feature duties halfway through his second season. This is the time of the year teams turn more to youngsters, and you should too if you're looking for running back lineup production for the stretch run. Get the edge in your fantasy football league every day by listening to Locked On Fantasy Football on your preferred podcast provider.
We're now joined by Greg Peterson. He's the co-host of That's Gold Show. He's also a host on VSIN. You can follow him on Twitter at @GUnit_81. Greg, it's been a minute. How are things?
Things are terrific. College basketball is back in our lives. In my opinion, we're all the better for it. I've been so excited for this stuff. I appreciate you guys having me. Thank you.
Oh, yeah, we appreciate the time. So, obviously, folks in town here at Auburn, very excited. Auburn, over the past year or so, that Final Four run has kind of turned Auburn into a basketball school. So, a lot of folks excited. They get things going against Georgia Southern tonight. And what can you tell us about this Auburn team? What have you kind of seen? They lost a lot. It's a totally different looking team than this team that made the Final Four a year ago.
Oh, absolutely. This is an Auburn team that last year when they made their run to the Final Four was in the top 2 or 3 in pretty much every metric when it comes to grabbing steals, forcing turnovers, things like that, because they had a great backcourt. Jared Harper and Bryce Brown were really the fulcrum of that team. Now you're looking at a team that actually is built a little bit more on low post presences. By that I mean this team is probably going to be seeing a healthy dose of Austin Riley, Anthony McLemore, a guy who a couple years ago was able to generate so many blocks for this team before he got injured.
Sure.
He's now going to be a focal point of this team. Obviously, you're going to bring in some freshmen, but I anticipate Bruce Pearl's team to be a little bit slower than in past years, because with Auburn, we've gotten so accustomed to this team just being able to force turnovers, firing up all those threes. I think that they're going to be going down in the post a bit more.
Yeah, that'll be interesting to see a Bruce Pearl team do that. I know you spent a lot of time looking at the lines in Vegas and kind of speculating on where how bad teams are going to beat other teams. But when you have a team like Auburn that has a bunch of freshmen and a bunch of unknowns, guys like Isaac Okoro have the fan base pretty excited. But I mean, how do you kind of calculate and take all of that information, all of those unknowns into consideration?
The biggest thing is just trying to take a look at how these guys project to the college level. Taking a look at, okay, is this guy a good free throw shooter? Is he able to knock down threes? Because a lot of these teams, they really get benefited when they are squads that do a very good job of doing the little things. It's why Virginia was able to win the national championship last year. A very stout defense, a team that doesn't beat itself, efficient on offense, doesn't turn the ball over. Those are the sorts of little things that you look for, because while Duke was able to bring in the top 3 freshmen last year, the reason why they didn't make the Final Four, they were unable to shoot threes. They sometimes killed themselves with turnovers, and depth is a big thing as well. One reason why Auburn, I feel like, is going to be able to have a good year is because they are bringing in a lot of solid freshmen, and they do have quite a bit coming back from last year. We mentioned all the guard play that is being lost. Obviously, that is going to hurt this team, but at the very least, you do have someone like an Austin Wiley who's coming back, who's been in the program for quite a few years, in Anthony McLemore, who has served his time certainly at Auburn. He's doing a very good job of giving this team a little bit of leadership, and you need that, because typically whenever we see Kentucky, a team out there in the SEC, make their runs, it's because they do have a couple guys that have a little bit of leadership. When the Kentucky teams have all freshmen, yeah, they might be able to have a good regular season, but when it comes to the postseason, typically that's when they fall short.
While we're talking about the postseason, I saw this morning a lot of people predicting that Florida has a good shot to go to the Final Four this season. Obviously, I believe Mike White is their coach. He's doing a great job down there, and he's been building something. What is it about these other SEC teams that led to Auburn being picked 4th by the media members for this season?
I think that it's just the fact that you do have a couple juggernauts out there in the SEC in front of Auburn at this point, because with Kentucky, we all know that they're bringing in that freshman class. You bring in like Tyrese Maxey, guys of that ilk, and they also bring in a graduate transfer, Nate Sestina. I think that it is very interesting that John Calipari is adapting the graduate transfer model. We saw it with Reed Travis last year. This year they bring in a gentleman from Bucknell by the name of Nate Sestina, who shot 38% from 3, 6'9" combo player that put up 15 points per game. I think that is going to be something to really watch out for. And then when you talk about Florida, the big thing that really pushed them over the top is a graduate transfer of their own in Kerry Blackshear. Kerry Blackshear, when he was at Virginia Tech down the stretch, I think the last 2 months of the season, he was shooting 37% from 3, 6'10" combo player, puts up 8 rebounds. He's able to pour in 15 points. You combine that with the point guard in Andrew Nemhard, who gave out over 5 assists per game. You bring back so much of last year's team other than really Kayvon Allen, and it leads to Florida being that team that becomes a chic pick to be able to make the Final Four. And Auburn just really doesn't have those graduate transfers like the teams that were picked in front of them in the SEC. But what they do have is a little bit of a better style, and they do have a little bit more experience returning, which is why you notice that they're going to be picked in front of a couple of other teams that were able to make the NCAA tournament last year in the SEC, like a Tennessee, because let's face it, with Tennessee, they bring in a little bit with regards to their freshman class, but they don't necessarily have as much returning as Auburn as well. So it's sort of one of those balancing acts.
Greg, when you look at Auburn's first two opponents this year, Georgia Southern tonight at the time of us recording this, and then we've got Davidson coming up this Friday. How do you expect Auburn to fare against both of those opponents?
I think that they should be able to win both those games, but I will say Auburn is actually challenging itself to begin the season. Davidson is no pushover. They were a team that was able to be in the top 3 in the Atlantic 10 last year. Kellen Grady is a guy that pours in 16 points per game. Depth is a serious issue with this Davidson team. They only go about 6 deep, but those 6 players, very good. They're able to knock down some threes. John Axel Goodmanson is a gentleman that does a little bit of everything, averages 16 points, 7 rebounds, a couple of assists. So I think that's very intriguing. And Georgia Southern, I think, is going to be a good matchup to start off the year as well, because with Georgia Southern, this is a team that they want to get it into the paint. They lose a guy by the name of Tukey Brown that was able to give them nearly 5 assists, 20 points per game, but this is a squad last year that was one of the tops in the country in regards to being able to generate points from 2-point range, because what a 2-point rate is essentially the amount of shots that you take from inside the 3-point arc, and Georgia Southern was in the top 5 in that regard last year. They really like to kick it up tempo, average over 80 points per game, and they're one of the better teams out there in the Sun Belt. So it's not like Auburn is going to be going up against like Kentucky or anything to begin the year, but at the same time, they're doing a much better job than some of these schools like playing against an Elkhorn State, a Texas A&M Corpus Christi, or something like that. So I think that it's a perfect way for Auburn to start the year. I think they should be able to win both games, but these games aren't going to be like the 30-point blowouts that sometimes you're accustomed to seeing at the beginning of the year.
When you're finished with today's episode, the Locked On Podcast Network has an amazing national show lineup for you. Every Monday, the new Hollinger and Duncan NBA show brings you insight from former NBA executive and analytics guru John Hollinger. Rejecting the Screen brings you 2 episodes a week with fun NBA talk and a long-form interview every Thursday. Your daily 30-minute NBA show is Locked On NBA, updating you on the previous night's action and looking ahead to what's next. The Locked On Podcast Network All-Star National Lineup, Hollinger and Duncan NBA Show, Rejecting the Screen, and Locked On NBA. Your team.
Greetings, 12 Locked On Seahawks podcast.
Who dat family, and welcome into this week's Locked On Saints.
Hello to all you Foxborough faithful, Locked On Patriots.
Every day.
Another Victory Monday.
It's officially Throwback Tuesday.
Crossover Wednesday episode.
Thursday Night Football.
It is Red Friday edition.
When it comes to the biggest stories.
And so the Chiefs' news story of today is, unfortunately, at this point in the season, it is continuing to be injuries.
You need to be locked on.
We've touched about it on this show and all over Twitter and all that.
And all of a sudden we have a great football team with a championship defense, a franchise quarterback, a running game that can't be stopped. This is exactly why we watch football.
Good quarterbacks are maximized in good systems. And that's exactly what we're seeing with Matt LaFleur and Aaron Rodgers this season.
Wherever you get your podcasts.
In the Apple Podcast app.
Google Podcasts.
Spotify.
Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
So with that challenge, and we know Auburn has, one of the easier out-of-conference schedules in general just on paper before they really get into the conference play, do you think that there's a realistic expectation that Auburn could get into SEC play, undefeated or with 1 loss? Or do you think that just with growing pains, the backcourt, obviously graduating like you talked about, if that's not a realistic expectation?
I think that 0-1 losses is a pretty realistic expectation just because, like you mentioned, Auburn not necessarily going to be going up against some of these big blue blood schools to start off SEC play. Now, once SEC play starts, I think it's going to be anyone's guess, because what we notice in the SEC as well is we've got a lot of turnover. Arkansas has a new coach in Eric Musselman. Alabama brings in Nate Oates. That's right in your neck of the woods. He comes over from Buffalo. He should be turning that school a little bit more up-tempo. LSU has a completely revamped roster after they were able to win the SEC last year. So you do have a lot of changes, but you do mention the fact that Auburn not necessarily playing a murderer's row to start the year. I would probably peg it at 1 loss going into SEC play personally.
Greg, thank you so much for your time today. We really appreciate it. Where can people find you and hear you?
like you mentioned, That's Gold Show. I do a podcast called That's Gold with Steve Heitner. You can find it on Apple Podcasts, Google Play, Spotify, Stitcher, and TuneIn. I also do a college basketball podcast called College Hoops Overtime Betting. That is on all those fine podcasts as well, and I break down every single college basketball game every single day. So anytime that Auburn is playing, I'm going to be going into that game and all the other ones in the SEC, the Big Ten, all those major schools. So you can find both of those, and you can also catch me on Twitter at @GUnit_81.
Greg, thank you so much, man. Let's do this again soon. Good stuff from Greg. That guy's really smart. He watches a lot of basketball, and I've listened to his podcast. I mean, he breaks down literally every college basketball game of the year. It's crazy.
I'm going to be honest with you. That sounds like my kind of podcast, and I'm afraid to listen to it.
You would love it. They'll put one out tonight. You should listen to it.
I know, I'm sure. I'm worried that if I start listening to it, I'll either A, go bankrupt, or B, get like really, really into it. I don't think I can handle it.
Well, it's awesome because he does it right after the games. He like puts it out at midnight, and so you get it every day when you drive to work. People, please keep listening to my podcast. Please don't leave me. All right, so tomorrow on the show, we chat with Chad Slade. To be honest, I already recorded the interview with him. I asked him about, he played for similar coaches. He talks about Malzahn. He talks about the players. He talks about the Auburn family and kind of all the situation because he was pretty outspoken on Twitter discussing a lot of things about how the players were tweeting at fans. So we chat about all that and more. And he had some stuff to say about Gus Malzahn too. So be sure to tune in to that. Michael, where can people find you and hear you, bud?
Follow me on Twitter at CouchPapTato.
All right, follow me on Twitter at ZBlackerby. Follow the show on Twitter at Locked On Auburn. This has been another edition of the Locked On Auburn podcast.
It's the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
When you're finished with today's episode, the Locked On Podcast Network has an amazing national show lineup for you. Every Monday, the new Hollinger and Duncan NBA show brings you insight from former NBA executive and analytics guru John Hollinger. Rejecting the Screen brings you 2 episodes a week with fun NBA talk and a long-form interview every Thursday. Your daily 30-minute NBA show is Locked On NBA, updating you on the previous night's action and looking ahead to what's next. The Locked On Podcast Network All-Star National Lineup, Hollinger and Duncan NBA Show, Rejecting the Screen, and Locked On NBA.